Recording? Cool. Kia ora, hello everyone. My name's Nigel, and today I'm going to discuss with you how to construct a raised garden wicker bed, which is like a standard raised bed for vegetables and herbs and such like, but in this case they are to a limited degree self-watering, so a lot less maintenance, a lot less water. We got lucky because when we moved to this property, the original owner had already constructed this bed here, which consists of a couple of 200mm high panels, and internally he's put in some steel posts for strength and framing. If you go and do this yourself, it's a considerable cost. In the infrastructure for these beds, this is probably the most expensive part, so we're lucky in the sense that initially we inherited it, so that's less cost to us. What I would say is that if it was my original option, I would have put the posts from a strength point of view on the outside of the timber, because the weight is going to be pushing outwards once we fill it up with aggregate and your soil media for growing, and of course water, which collectively is quite heavy. In saying that, and one of the other advantages for doing that too is that these posts that are internal, for one of these beds to be successful, we're going to be plastic lining within it, and the screws in the posts potentially could penetrate the actual plastic membrane, which we need to be watertight to, like a swimming pool in a sense, to hold the water levelly so it doesn't drain out. What I have done is, originally when we got here, this bed was just filled with rubbish, so I don't think the owner actually ever got around to using it for its purpose. So we've removed a lot of branches and plastic and household rubbish containers, taken those off, and what I've done is I've removed what decent soil, consisting of organic matter, some aggregate and clay. I've removed that out and levelled it right down to the bottom of the lower 200mm panel. So raked it out, levelled it, so it's ready for the next step, which is to insert a plastic liner. Now, one of the things that you need to be wary of when you start these is, if you look down here, there's a few existing tree roots that have come from a neighbouring tree which is behind us there, which is standing at about 15 foot high. We're about 10 metres from the main trunk of that tree, and the drip line is at least 2 metres from where I'm standing now, so it just potentially shows how far roots can travel. So it's important to remove as many of those as you possibly can, and you can tell they're not major roots this far out from the main trunk. They're mainly feeders. And so I've gone through and picked out as many as I can without making a big mission out of it. And the next step is to insert the plastic liner, which I have here. So when you're doing these, it's about cost, so you need to be cost effective. This is standard building plastic. You can pick this up depending on where you go, for less than $6 a metre. And they standard width for these. You notice if I wire this out over across the bed, just on top, the bed itself is 5 metres long, and it's 1.4 from the top of my head wide. What we need is obviously a solid base. We need the plastic to come up the sides and at the ends. Then we're going to staple it in, and eventually we'll fill it with water, amongst other things. We have got this width, so it's going to come up, once I've once we've laid it down, it'll come up to around about this level, or maybe a little bit less. So we don't have the total width to come all the way to the top and staple it around. And that's because all that was available was the shop was this width. That's okay, because ultimately you don't fill the whole bed with water. So if we can get it at least up to 150 to 200 mil high, happy days. Once this is laid out, this is just to explain the steps, and then we'll take you through the process as we build it. Once this is laid out and given us a solid base, the next step is to lay this 2-inch effectively drainage tubing, which is flexible in its design, but it's also perforated right throughout. We'll be laying this plastic down and then placing this along its full length on both sides, and then whatever's left will intertwine on the bottom. The unfortunate thing is this only came in 10 metre lengths. I really only needed 5, so it's okay. It's cost us about 30 bucks for the entire roll. They won't sell this at the local hardware store by the metre, but we'll utilise what we've got anyway. And the trick is, once the plastic's laid out and you lay this stuff, you end up, if you just picture this end of it, coming up to about that height in the corners, because ultimately you are not going to be watering this bed from the top. You'll do it irregularly. What you'll do is end up putting your hose, and that's why I've chosen this 2-inch diameter. You put your hose into there and just turn the hose on and you can walk away. So watering becomes less of a hassle and obviously more efficient because it's going to capture it in the membrane. Now once that tubing's in, we'll then be laying about 100 mil, in that base there, probably 1 cubic metre of 200 mil aggregate, and that it allows for really good drainage, and it's not as expensive as mix, but ultimately it's about allowing the drainage capacity, having a condition in the base of the bed. Obviously there's going to be a lot of water in there, but we're going to separate the aggregate once that's laid and flattened out and intertwined and levelled off with the drainage perforated coil. We're then going to use this, which costs 13 bucks a roll, and this is called mulch mat. Now it's a fine membrane which is permeable. It's slightly perforated. To the touch it feels solid, but water can infiltrate and percolate through it. So once the aggregate's laid down with the tube, we'll then be laying this as a solid level right throughout the bed. And what this mulch mat's going to do is it's going to separate the 20 ml aggregate from our final soil media mix that goes on top, which is what your plants are going to be growing in. Now because the soil media on top has various sizes right down to clay colloid, like you need this to stop that soil media from filtering through and into the base of the actual bed and mixing with the aggregate. That's the sole purpose of this. So this, like I said, was about 12 or 13 bucks, and it's 1.6 metres wide, which is perfect because this off the top of my head is 1.4. So, and it comes, I think this is a 10 metre length. Yeah, 1.6 times 10. So what I'll do, because the bed is 5 metres, I'll double this over and we'll utilise the lot. You don't need to, but it's sort of waste not, want not. The next step, once you've laid that, is that you need to drill some holes through the side of the bed at a certain height for actual drainage. And what I've done for that is I've selected 22mm PVC tube, standard. This was an offcut at the hardware store that they didn't require, So that was free, and I'm sure you'll find that at your local refuse tip or whatever. Most people have probably got some of the stuff hanging around the garden or in the shed not being used, so it's perfect for it. And all you need to do with this is it needs to go through the sidewall, so the thickness of whatever your boards are. So if you picture this here, sticking out of your bed on this side about that far, we are going to have a hole coming out at the level down here. This is where this is going to be coming out, down here. You're then going to put an elbow on it that fits the 22mm like that, and we'll then put another section of, depending on the height that you want to maintain, on top. This is a drill bit that costs $14. It goes in a standard Hitachi Black & Decker drill, whatever you're using, and it's going to allow you to drill the hole, and this is the 22mm diameter, through there for this to fit through. It's going to be skin tight, which is fine, that's what you want. Now that hole has to go not only through here, but you're going to have to put it through the slit in the plastic. So if you can picture, once this membrane's in, everything's in it, and you're starting to fill it up with the water through your perforated tubing, to maintain the perfect level of water, you're going to have one of these sticking out at whatever height you want that to be. And if you picture another piece of 22mm PVC coming out the top, when you're happy with the level, then you can actually turn it up, like upwards with your tube, and that water level will go up to wherever the height is on that tube. If you want to drain the bed, then you turn it sideways or down, and the water's going to drain out of the bed. So what I've seen with a lot of people on these on YouTube and whatever is that they tend to put one or two in. I've got 4 of these elbows, so I'm going to stick one on either end of the bed and one on each side. And you know, these elbows, you'll pick these up for next to nicks, 50 cents a pop, depending on where you're shopping. The other thing that I've picked up to make the job a little bit easier is a bit of PVC cement, which you can just brush on once you fix these on. And here, where we live, in southeast Queensland, we have like a wasp issue, and to prevent those wasps from climbing up into the PVC tube, I'm going to ultimately bend this gauze, which is effectively just a fine shade cloth. Once again, that was an offcut from the hardware store that they didn't want, so that was free. Just cut out a small section of that. You can push it over the end like that, and I'll use a zip tie around the end. That's just going to impede those wasps from climbing up the final tube that you've got out the side and filling it up with the nests that they build, and therefore blocking your drainage system. Where we live and where we're located is in southeast Queensland, and we have a variable temperature range out here, where in the summertime it's not unusual for us to peak in the sun above 50 degrees Celsius, and that makes gardening very difficult, particularly if you're a busy person, you're working. So the efficiency levels that we'll get by having the self-watering bed means that until I put this to work and get some effective data, rather than having to water this twice a day, some people are suggesting that you only have to water through the actual hoses once a week, which is a major. We're not expecting total free maintenance, and in actual fact soil benefits from you doing a hand water every now and then, but that's something I'll be able to bring to you later, evidentially, once we get it to where it needs to be and get some seedlings growing. And yeah, the trick to this though is to avoid anaerobic conditions and maintain a fairly easy and less
maintenance intensive vegetable and herb bed for you to enjoy. Anyway, we'll get constructing and we'll give you some step-by-step updates as we go through the process. Thanks.